Sony is supposedly working on not what we asked for, but something else, which also we do kind of ask for. They are currently apparently working on a new PlayStation 2 emulator. Now, I don't know too much about this. I don't know if it's built into PS5 or if it's akin to the PS1 emulator they did in the past, where it's a standalone system. I would argue it's likely going to be its standalone little thing. But I'd love to hear your guys' opinion, especially because, Davey, you were saying yourself earlier that you'd like a PS3 emulator being on the system so you could download PS3 games. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this specifically. What do you feel about this rumor?
Sure. So this rumor's come from PSU.com, and we've used them every now and again, not that often, but it's quite interesting. And originally it comes from a YouTuber called Mystic, and he was discussing the state of the classic games library that comes with PS Plus Premium, and he says he has it on good authority that a new emulator is in the works. Now, for me, that doesn't really make an awful lot of sense, because PS2 games just work. You know, you've got no issue with that. You can download them as is. So it doesn't really make an awful lot of sense why they'd want to, bolster their emulation for PS2. Unless it's a case that maybe earlier titles in the PS2's lifespan, and the PS2 was out for a goddamn long time, maybe those aren't working and it's more the newer ones that are. I don't know. I don't know too much about that. But for me, what makes the most sense if they were on about doing this would be realizing the failed vision they had with the PlayStation Classic. The PS Classic, I've got one, and it's a great bit of kit. I really like it. The issue was the game library was pretty gash. If you weren't a fan of the game that can't be mentioned or Final Fantasy, you were kind of fucked. I mean, it had MGS1 on it, which is all I needed to be able to buy it. But that was about it, right? I think that if they're doing this and they're working on emulation and they want to get a really good emulator, go for a PS2 Classic. Put one out there. Spend the money, get all the publishers on board. The PS2 generation, you had some fantastic franchises. You had the birth of God of War and God of War 1 and 2 on there. You've got to include those. You can include so many awesome fighting games that came out in PS2 generation, from the likes of Marvel vs. Capcom 2. You can go, the well is so deep on PS2. And I think if you included 40 or 50 games, it wouldn't be enough to do justice for how good that generation is. Realistically, I can see it probably being a 30-game collection, and then you're using all the partners that you're used to, from the likes of Rockstar. You've got to have GTA 3 on there, for example. Got to have Vice City. Got to have San Andreas, right? Got to have those three. They're pivotal for PS2. Got to have Ico, Shadow of the Colossus. I think just the list goes on and on and on for PS2 generation. It's the one to do it. And there's so much nostalgia for the PS2. It's not my favorite out of the PlayStation suite, but a lot of people, it was their first introduction to PlayStation. And I think it just print money, especially if it was done well and they learned from the lessons of the PS Classic. That's what I'd like to see them do, Spence, rather than just bolster up what Mystic's saying and improve the PlayStation Plus Premium emulation.
To be fair, a lot of good points. A lot of great points, actually. Phil, mate, I'm not sure on your thoughts on this. I'm not sure your experience with the PlayStation 2. How do you feel about this?
I'm a massive lover of the PS2. I've got one set up right next to me. I've got the PS2 Slim on my CRT, and I'm currently still finishing off the end of Half-Life. Of course, that episode will be coming to a podcasting service near you very, very soon. But a PS2 emulator, is this news to me? Is this a rumor? I believe it, of course. I'm sure Sony's working on all types of emulation. We've heard lately that they're working on the PS3, and that's been spoken about for yonks, absolutely yonks. It's been even confirmed by Sony they're doing the PS3 emulator, but that's just not there. It's not 100% for them yet. And we've even seen job postings for it. So I wouldn't be surprised in the future months we actually see some job postings now for the PS2 emulation as well. I think they'd almost need an emulation team within Sony, if they haven't got one already, to really put some effort into this, because as Davey alluded to earlier, and I think we spoke a little bit about this in a previous topic, make sure you go back to that with the price hike to PS Premium from $99.99 to $119.99, they really need to improve that classic catalogue to actually make it worth the money. So having these emulators ready and working on the sort of higher level or higher echelon of video games, this is what we need, and we need it now. It's actually coming a bit late for me. So I can completely believe it, but it's not happening yet. This is what I want to see. If you came to me and said, they're launching the PS2 emulator, they're launching the PS3 emulator next week, next month, I'd be like, wow, that's real news. But them working on it, it's not really news because I expected they were anyway. I just want to see it.
Fair points, mate. Fair points. And a good little justification for the price hike as well. Actually really good. I like that a lot. My thoughts on this, I would much prefer it to be a standalone thing. Just because of how cute it would look. That little PS2, if they do a small version of PS2 Slim, oh, it'd be so cute just there. I'd love it. But like you said, Davey, it would need that catalogue of games for it to kind of stand a chance. So it would need your Final Fantasies, your GTAs, maybe your Kingdom Hearts. It would need kind of games for every era, I suppose, or every age group. So this is where a parent could be like, kid, you're going to learn. You're going to play my classic games, what I grew up with. And it's that perfect little cheap bit of kit that a parent could buy for their kid. And it's already full of all those games. It's basically a plug and play from back in the day. But rather than it just having Street Fighter 2 and Ghouls and Goblins, or just having a weird, cheap Spider-Man game, it could have this great catalogue of games. And I think it would definitely stand well on its own as its own little emulator. But then that being said, if the software's there, they could do both. They've already done it. They'll make it. And they could make it on that little system and then just chuck it on PS Plus as a little extra as well. Makes perfect sense. Like you said, Phil, I'm sure they've been working on this for ages. I'm not surprised this is happening. I don't think it's much of a rumour. But I think this being a rumour now just means that it's close to fruition. And we'll probably be seeing some news about it very soon.